HQ. Kiana Martin thrilled to be joined alongside Chris Williamson. And on a week where the sports world has zeroed in on the biggest game of the year out in Northern California, it was the NBA who stole the spotlight ahead of this week's trade deadline.
You ain't lying, Kiana, because some years, the deadline underwhelms us all. But this year, we got ball clubs trading a 36-year-old All-Star for a 26-year-old All-Star. And that 36-year-old just happens to be Clippers star James Harden. He knows a thing or two about being traded. So, the Cavaliers getting James Harden for Darius Garland, according to ESPN. LA is also receiving a second-round pick in the deal. The trade ends Harden's 3-season stint with the Clippers and puts him on his 5th team over the past 6 seasons. Garland was an All-Star last year, but he's been dealing with toe injuries dating back to last postseason, likely playing a role in Cleveland moving on from the 26-year-old. And for more on this news, we bring in CBS Sports NBA analyst John Gonzalez. And John, let's start with the sexy aspect, right? James Harden, the beard, going to Cleveland. How would you grade the move for the Cavaliers?
Yeah, I'll go B- here. They take on a guy who's a decade older than Darius Garland, and they give up a second-round pick to do it. Generally inadvisable, right? Older guy, and you have to give up the pick. But Darius Garland hasn't been healthy, right? He's only played 26 games this season. He missed the beginning of the year, and he hasn't played in 2 weeks with this nagging toe injury. And so I think the Cavs just didn't want to wait him out, right? Harden is 36, but for all his faults and all his foibles and all his asking out in previous stops, he's durable, right? He plays, he puts up good numbers. And I think once you pair him with Donovan Mitchell in that backcourt, it becomes pretty explosive. And they needed somebody to shoulder the scoring load alongside Donovan Mitchell, somebody to help run the offense, to create shots. Plus, big men love playing with James Harden. So that's great news for Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen. Now, the Cavaliers do have to figure out what to do about James Harden's salary. He has a player option next year for $42.3 million, I guess. And I'm assuming that he would love to decline that in order to get a new deal with more years and a little bit more security as he winds down his career and goes into retirement. So we'll see what the Cavaliers do with that. But they're certainly in win now mode, Chris. I think they looked at this thing and went, hey, the East is gettable. We need a warm body to play. James Harden is more than that.
Hey, absolutely. Now, we don't know what's going to happen in the postseason, right? We've been accustomed to James Harden not really living up to expectations for some of this time during the playoffs. But, yeah, they're making a risk, and we'll see if it's going to pay out. Now, on the other side, with the Clippers and Darius Garland, how would you grade that? Again, because you got to factor in, as you mentioned, all the injuries that Darius Garland has been dealing with.
He does have the injuries, but that extra decade you're getting out of it makes it a B+ for me. So slightly better than what the Cavs got in this grade. And plus, they also pick up a second-round pick. Look, they're playing their best basketball right now, the Clippers are. Since mid-December, they're 17-5. But this is an old team, right? They desperately needed to get younger. Garland at 26, yes, he's had injury issues, but he's a 2-time All-Star. And so gaining that extra decade, you put him next to Ivica Zubac, who's 28 years old. That's a nice 1-2 punch. And then you figure out how to rebuild this thing on the fly when you have to start disassembling all the older pieces around them. And it should be easy enough, right, to recruit around those two guys to Los Angeles, where NBA basketball players famously love to go. So I think that's a really nice move for them. And then on top of that, hey, for good measure, they get a second-round pick. We talked about this earlier, Chris. I was thinking, like, if a pick was going in any direction, that it would be going in the opposite direction, that it would be going to Cleveland. But instead, somehow the Clippers get a second-round pick out of the Cavs because maybe the Cavs were a little antsy on this one. So I think it's a tidy bit of business for the LA Clippers.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you there. I think it is a good move for the Los Angeles Clippers, and we'll see how Darius Garland turns out to be once he does become healthy. Now, big picture-wise, when we look at the Cavaliers, this Eastern Conference, you got the Celtics tied for second, the Pistons #1. They just beat the Denver Nuggets. What do you think about the Cavaliers as they stack up in the East, as they're looking to become a championship team and get that NBA title again?
Yeah, it was a disappointing postseason exit for them last year. It was a slow start to this season. But now all of a sudden you look around and they're only a game out of 4th place, which would give them home court in the first round. And they just got better by adding Harden because, as we mentioned, Darius Garland has those injury and availability issues. They also earlier, Chris, turned DeAndre Hunter into Dennis Schroeder and Keon Ellis, who are 2 players who will be really useful in their rotation. So they're on the come right now. But in the Eastern Conference, now all of a sudden you got some movement, right? You got the Celtics, who added a big man today. They flipped Anthony Simons for Nikola Vucevic, so that bolsters a front court that was pretty thin. The Pistons, I'm a big Pistons believer. They've been first place in the Eastern Conference Conference all season long. They go and pick up Kevin Huerter, who should be a useful shooter in their rotation because they were basically done with Jaden Ivey. So, and they might even have another move in them, Detroit. So the Pistons, I think, are the best team in the East. They've got Cade Cunningham, top 5 MVP candidate. Jalen Duren has taken the leap, but now behind them, right? The Knicks have won 6 in a row. Boston's right there, as I mentioned. And then, of course, Cleveland, who have made all these moves. They're on the march. So I think with apologies to the Raptors.
I was going to say, what about the Raptors, man? Because you're like, Toronto fans, they're not going to be happy with you.
I know they're not, and believe me, everybody in Philadelphia, my friends and family aren't going to like this either, but I basically think it's a 4-team race with the Pistons, the Knicks, the Celtics, and now the Cavaliers.
You know what? I do not have an argument for that. Right now, as it's currently constructed, I think that's a fair 4-team race. John Gonzalez, always appreciate the insight, man. Take care. All right, so there were some more trades made outside of James Harden going to Cleveland for Darius Garland. We got the Celtics, as John mentioned, adding to their front court, acquiring Nikola Vucevic for Anthony Simons, a second-rounder. The Jazz making a surprising splash, landing 2-time All-Star Jaren Jackson Jr. Utah sending a package that includes 3 first-round picks to the Grizzlies. And the top team in the East, the Pistons, adding Kevin Huerter in a 3-team deal with the Bulls and T-Wolves. NBA trade deadline is Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern. Clippers are trading James Harden to the Cleveland Cavaliers for Darius Garland and a second-round pick, according to ESPN. So James Harden, yet again, going to another team after he thought maybe he would ride it out in L.A. How about Darius Garland going out to L.A. for the Clippers? And, of course, Clippers getting a second-round pick. And to react to this news, we bring in CBS Sports NBA analyst John Gonzalez. And John, we thought this was just a matter of time, right, when it had leaked out. Now it is pretty much official. What's your reaction to James Harden going to Cleveland? Harden going to Cleveland is not something that I had on my bingo card when he started out in his NBA career.
Yeah, or even just 2 days ago, right? I mean, because the Clippers have been playing much better since December 20th. This took a lot of people off guard. It took you, me, the NBA, and certainly the Clippers. Now, maybe it shouldn't because of James Harden's history, right? He asked out of basically every team he's ever been on except for the Thunder. It didn't go well in Houston. He wanted to go to Brooklyn. He goes to Brooklyn. It doesn't go well there. He wants to go to Philly. When he gets to Philly, he's reunited with one of his best buddies, Daryl Morey, until Daryl Morey's not his best buddy anymore, and he calls Daryl Morey a liar, and he forces his way to LA. And now all of a sudden, because he's got a player option next year for $42.3 million that he'd like to decline and get more money, he looks around and goes, well, even though the Clippers have had the best record in the NBA since mid-December, 17-5, not enough for me. What I want is a little bit more security. I want some more years. So let's get me to a team where I have a chance to win and that might also pay me. And that evidently is the Cleveland Cavaliers. What I wrote about today, Chris, and what I'm a little surprised about is with the history of James Harden, even though he remains a really good player, a top 25 player in the NBA, at some point, these teams that keep putting their hands up and going, yeah, I want in on the James Harden experience. Did you not see all the other stops that happened before this? But I guess the Cavs are saying that they'd rather have him than kind of hope that Darius Garland, who's been hurt for a while, is going to get healthy sooner than later.
So on the topic of James Harden, it's, as you pointed out, right? I'm not sure how long it's going to last. So how long it's going to last. If you're the Cavaliers, you're hoping that, listen, you strike gold in this season, pair him up with Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, and they win a title because you just don't know how long it's going to last. What do you think about the fit with Donovan Mitchell and James Harden as your backcourt duo?
I mean, they're scoring in bunches, right? I mean, Donovan Mitchell has talked about the fact that he could use some help in terms of, being on the ball, scoring the ball. There's been a lot of offensive firepower and a lot of shouldering the offensive load that Donovan Mitchell has been asked to do this season because of injuries up and down the roster, including and especially to Darius Garland, who's only played 26 games because of a toe injury. Evan Mobley, last year's Defensive Player of the Year, he's been in and out of the lineup. And so Donovan Mitchell's been asked to do a lot. Now, James Harden, he's been available. He's been a good scorer. He's an excellent passer. That's going to really up the offensive oomph for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, you look in the Eastern Conference, right? Like Cleveland has been pretty uneven this season, but they're now just starting to find their way. So I think like just having somebody of James caliber or James Harden's caliber in the lineup does wonders for the Cavs. And I think they probably look at the East and go, look, it was disappointing last year when they get bounced out of the playoffs. They come in this season thinking that they're the favorites in the Eastern Conference. Nope, that's not the case. They're just now into the top 6 in the Eastern Conference, where they're looking around going, okay, maybe we can get home court advantage in the first round. Top 4 seed would be good for them. So they think, okay, well, we're not going to wait around on Darius Garland, even though he's a decade younger than James Harden. We're going to bring in James Harden, and as you said, Chris, roll the dice on maybe trying to win something this year.
Yeah, trying to win it this year. So obviously they want immediate results. And, James Harden, listen, he's made enough money for both of us combined and then some over his tenure, right? But what do you think about his contract situation and how this factors into the Cavaliers agreeing to this deal? Because, again, he's 36, man, and we know he's playing really good ball, but do you feel like this is going to end well for the Cavaliers?
Well, I mean, does it end well for any team that picks up James Harden, right? I mean, I rattled off all the previous stops where it didn't end well in Houston. It didn't end well in Brooklyn when he wanted to go and be reunited with his buddy KD. And then it didn't end well in Philadelphia when he was reunited with his former best friend and former general manager, Daryl Morey. And then it didn't end well with Kawhi Leonard here in Los Angeles. So the odds are it's not going to end well in Cleveland either. Now, in terms of his money, he has a player option next year for $42.3 million. I think what happens right now is the Cleveland Cavaliers want to kick the tires on this thing and see how it looks with Donovan Mitchell and James Harden in that backcourt. You didn't have to move on from Evan Mobley. You still have Jared Allen. That's a pretty talented first 4, right? But if they decide that, they don't want to pay James Harden, who's 36, will be 37 this summer, maybe he picks up the option. Now, he doesn't want to do that. Part of the reason why I suspect he forces his way out of LA is he is now at 36 years old on the very back end of his career. And what he's looking for